Kia ora comrades, welcome to our September Local Area Network report, brought to you by yours truly, Ani White. This month we'll be discussing the Djab Wurrung struggle in Victoria, Australia, where I live, which in some ways parallels the Protect Ihu campaign covered last time. And I'll be talking a bit about parallels with other Indigenous struggles internationally as well. Now, just a small note on the Ihu campaign. I thought it was worth mentioning that Jacinda Ardern has failed to take a clear position on that, despite her international reputation as a progressive. While I'll grant that Ardern is preferable to the calibre of world leaders proliferating right now, she's a bit of a fence rider, and the praise for her just shows how low the bar is these days. Anyway, back to Djab Wurrung in so-called Australia. This is another Indigenous fight to protect land that capital and the state plan to use for so-called development, like Ihu and many other Indigenous fights internationally. In this case, quote the Djab Wurrung website, quote, sacred birthing trees on Djab Wurrung territory need protecting. Over 50 generations have been born on these sites, and the birthing trees themselves are 800 years old. We are protecting them from Vic Labour Party's planned highway extension that is set to destroy this dreaming landscape, close quote. Reportedly, consultation has been conducted undemocratically, with appointed Indigenous representatives approving the work, even though meetings went ahead without members of the governing body. This so-called consultation with an exclusive, carefully selected Indigenous leadership body parallels Ihu and it's actually a classic colonial tactic. Also, like Standing Rock and other campaigns, this is a fight not only for Indigenous self-determination, but also for environmental justice, because clearly we need to start expanding public transport infrastructure significantly rather than highways, particularly highways on Indigenous land. In another sadder parallel with other Indigenous struggles around the world, an unknown person carried out arson on an ancestor tree, and this reminded me of the appalling, accelerated burning of the Amazon in Brazil. The protectors at Djab Wurrung have received a trespass notice. Speculation abounds that the cops are waiting for the numbers to dwindle, so the organisers are routinely calling out for allies to join the occupation. I've headed up a couple of times when the organisers sent out red alerts, first as part of a convoy from Melbourne Trades Hall shortly after the trespass notice was issued, bringing up some spare canned soup and instant noodles, having heard that any food donated should not be expirable. The counter-occupation reminded me both of the Occupy movement, although Indigenous people have used these forms of organising long before that broke out, for example the Bastion Point struggle in Aotearoa. And it also reminded me of pictures I've seen of Ihu with a campsite demonstrating a kind of do-it-yourself attitude. After the welcome for country had called out for volunteers to perform various practical jobs, like digging a new toilet, demonstrating the somewhat unglamorous nature of dedicated political work, in contrast to the impression of activists as just a bunch of slackers in it for the thrill of the riot. The hosts were welcoming but clear about their boundaries, such as visitors not taking photographs of the ancestor trees without permission. Despite the trespass notice, cops didn't show up at that point. My car of 4 didn't stay very long as it was a 2-hour drive and none of us were sleeping there. but it was good to show some minimal support. Second time I headed up was when contractors and cops finally did show up attempting to start work, so another red alert was sent out. A very active Facebook group organised carpooling up. This time, staying 8 hours, I got more of a sense of the layout, which involved 3 camps across a number of kilometres, quite a logistical feat. There was a blockade at 2 sites to protect the ancestor trees. Cops were around, lingering, but made no serious attempts to break the picket. They spoke to the organisers a couple of times and kept driving by. After a few hours blockading, I helped with the dishes, then I sat around the fire for an hour or so before we headed back. More recently, this last week, there was an official truce for mediation, but reportedly contractors are still trying it on despite that official truce. If you want to donate to the campaign, look for the Djab Wurrung page on GoFundMe, and we'll link it in the description. They're also requesting donation of goods, people to keep the numbers healthy, and for supporters to call their representatives. But again, as with the Protect Ihu Matau, if you're outside of Victoria or Australia, you can again donate funds on the GoFundMe. And finally, a report on the local climate strike on September 20th. In Melbourne, over 100,000 attended this event. A tutorial in a uni class I'm tutoring cut off early so students could attend, making it an actual soft strike. Soft because it was supported by management. I attended as part of the Tertiary Education Union delegation. Initially it seemed modest sized as I was part of the union wing, which then joined with the student wing, but then it became clear it was massive when we reached the main rally at State Parliament. At that point I just moved on to the sidewalk and watched thousands streaming past for about half an hour. Tying in with our podcast topic of socialism and sci-fi, one nice sign that noted that aliens will be disappointed we chose capitalism over existence. So all in all, a successful mobilisation, yet of course the drastic emissions reductions that are needed continue to be notably non-existent. And on the international stage, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison notably did not attend the recent UN climate summit, while New Zealand PM Jacinda Ardern crowed about New Zealand's clean green image despite New Zealand's emissions continuing to rise. And it seems to me that all of these little reforms mean very little if we don't address the existential issue of rising emissions reductions overall. And that's my report done. As always, kia kaha comrades, good night and good luck.